Limgrave, Caelid, the lakes of Liurnia. Higher the lands reach up to the Altus Plateau, and even higher at the mountaintops of the Giants. These are the lands between. As it turns out, the name is quite literal. This is the centre, the place between it all. Other major regions with their own culture and nations, perhaps brought in by the Golden Order, hired or crushed. Out there are the other lands of Caden, of Eochaid, the land of the Reeds, the Badlands, or the lands of the Newman, the birthplace of Queen Marika and the Black Knife Assassins. The lands between serve as a melting pot of people, but by no means are they the only lands in Elden Ring. Today we take a look at what we know about those other lands and what they could mean for the future of Elden Ring, maybe in DLC. Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming, my name is Hollow, and this is my third lore video for Elden Ring, and with it we're trying something a little bit different today. Today, rather than picking one major topic or one specific person even, we are talking about the distant lands that wrap around the lands between, how impactful they are on the story and characters as we know today, and their possible involvements in future content. Unfortunately, you may hear it in my voice, I've been a bit unwell recently, so I probably sound a bit off today. Hopefully that doesn't affect the video. I just want to say another thank you for all the encouragement with these lore videos. I've had messages in private and also places like Discord or the comments. They've been very kind. As normal though, the basis of these lore videos are in-game descriptions from items, NPC dialogue or otherwise, and then using that we speculate based on that information, the best attempts to connect those dots, but this should never be taken as fact. But with that said, let's get started. I think we start strong with the land of the Newman, a fascinating race of people who are directly involved in the main story of Elden Ring. They're a bit like elves, really. And after all, Marika herself, she is Newman. The Black Knife Assassins, they're Newman. And we can even choose to be a Newman ourselves in the character creator. But what do we know about the lands of Newman? Let's find out. Surprisingly a good amount actually. We have a lot of item descriptions, NPC dialogue, and even maybe a location. The strongest though is easily the character creator information, where we can pick the Newman. The description of that states that this is the face of a Newman, supposed descendants of denizens of another world, long-lived but seldom born. What a surprise that was when I read that. I thought a physical land somewhere, maybe like super far west or something, was where we'd find Newman. But no, literally another world. And that description of the long-lived but seldom born thing, that makes me think of the Elves. Now, we know life exists on a cosmic level in Elden Ring. Astel is an obvious example, but we have things like the Alabaster Lords, who rose to life after a meteor struck from space. And then obviously like the Greater Will, which created the Golden Order, well that sent the literal Elden Beast to enforce its will on the lands. So to think that there could be another planet out there that has life on it that the Newmans come from, it's not exactly hard to believe. But how did the Newman even get here? Who are the Newman we know? Firstly, the most famous Newman in the lands between is obviously Marika. She's the vessel for the Elden Beast, and to be her consort is to be Elden Lord. Marika's hammer tells us exactly this, that it was made in the lands of the Newman, and that Marika brought this with her originally when she came here. Now it's been a bit modified by the runes that seem engraved into it, and it now has the power to shatter the Elden Ring, which is what Marika did with it. So the most famous and powerful character in the lands between isn't actually from these lands. She is Newman, and that means she's also from another world. The Newman are incredibly powerful by default. Any and all Newman are just inherently strong, which we know from the Newman runes. Throughout Elden Ring you can find runes that can be consumed to give you, well, runes. They come in different levels. The more powerful the container, the more runes you get. But some of the most valuable, most dense runes are the Newman runes. The runes tell us this. The Newman are said to have come from outside the lands between, and are in fact of the same stock as Queen Marika herself. Speaking of other Newman then, the Black Knife Assassins. The Black Knife armor set tells us exactly what we need to know. The assassins that carried out the deeds of the Knight of the Black Knives were all women, and rumoured to be Newman who had close ties to Marika herself. Not only were the Black Knives Newman, but they were connected directly to Marika. It seems they knew her in some capacity, and hints that Marika may have been involved in the Night of the Black Knives, and also the killing of Godwyn, her son. Or maybe she was betrayed. It's a very interesting topic, and we could get into that in a big detail, but that is not this video. So, all of those Black Knife assassins were Newman, explaining their incredible power, and their ability to wield death and death. And I thought this might be where the Newman stuff ends, until Rogier gets involved. He actually speaks to you about the Black Knives, and has theories about it, giving us this incredible line. The assassins who carried out the deed were scions of the Eternal City, a group entirely of women arrayed in armour of silver under cloaks which fooled the eye. That suggests that the Newman were actually royalty. You see, scions are descendants of notable families by definition, but more importantly, the Eternal City. That's Nokron or Nokstella specifically. If the Newman are ultimately royalty from the Eternal City, that gives us a shocking revelation and location of the land of the Newman, or at least some information about it. The location of many Newman runes that we can find in the game, those are in the various underground areas of, well, the Eternal City. We can learn a little bit about that region from the Nox set. These women are the personal guards of the Night Maidens, and the silk hides their eyes. Long ago, the Nox invoked the ire of the Greater Will and were banished deep underground. Now they live under a false night sky, in eternal anticipation of their liege, of the coming age of the stars, and their Lord of Night. Could the Newman and the Nox be one in the same? Maybe, but probably not. The Nox are specifically guards to the Night Maidens, who are just a higher ranking individual we actually encounter in game. Perhaps the Newmans, being scions, are royalty of the Eternal City, but they come from another world, and it's the Nox who wait in anticipation of the coming of the stars and their Lord of Night. It's all very surprising to me either way that the Newman and the Eternal City are actually linked. To recap though, the Newman come from another world. They are all very powerful beings who live for a very long time, but they're quite rare. Marika herself is a Newman, and also the Black Knives. The Newman are also scions though, who come from the Eternal City, which invoke the ire of the Greater Will, who banished that civilization underground. So, where is the land of Newman? Is it just Nokron and Nokstella? No, I don't think so. After all, think about it. This all started with learning that Newman come from another world. The Greater Will came after the Newman and then punished them later on. Nokron and Nokstella were created as a result of that punishment. It is simply underground, not another world. The false sky down there may be a beautiful effect to remind them of the night sky and what they worship in the cosmos and all that, but it's not real. So to answer the question, where is the land of Newman? I can only say that, yeah, it's out there in the stars somewhere. Maybe one day in DLC we'll go there. But that is everything Newman. Let's move on to the next land then. Let's speak about Caden. The Caden sellswords are a familiar face even to new players of Elden Ring. You see, you encounter them very early on in various areas around Limgrave. Some guard roads, some help transport a carriage of goods, and some just patrol the area. Clearly they're all serving some kind of task here, and whether they're on foot or horse, they are formidable opponents while you're still fresh out of the grave. The Caden come from a cold land to the north, and make their living as mercenaries. Proud and powerful warriors who have seen plenty of battle. We can learn more about them in detail thanks to their equipment, a spirit summon, and hey, even the character creator maybe. Let's start with the Caden sellsword Ashes. This is the spirit of a mercenary of horse-riding folk. Those who skillfully use massive blades made to dismount other riders, which enhances their already considerable strength with war cries. The sellswords of Caden made their prowess known on countless battlefields. Right off the bat, we confirm that yeah, they sell their combat ability for hire, they're well versed in battle, and they also specialize in horse combat. Clearly, they're also working with the soldiers of Limgrave, who serve Godric and the Storm Keep. It seems very likely that Godric hired them as mercenaries to help bolster his small force. Godric is the type of guy who will take anything he can really get, however he can get it, even if he has to pay for it. Their armor set elaborates further though. These hulking, fearless mercenaries are said to hail from the mountaintops of the wintry north, and that Caden is actually the name of their home settlement. Obviously, the mountaintops of the wintry north sounds like the mountaintops of the giants. That's cold, it's far north, and it's certainly mountaintops as well. And yet, there are almost no Caden sellswords there. In fact, there are none on the eastern side of that whole region, and there's just a single Caden warrior found on the western side, lower down in the consecrated snowfield. What is he doing there? It's hard to say. Seems to be protecting these miners who are gathering here for whatever reason, but they seem very out of place. Could Caden really just be a tiny settlement somewhere in the mountaintops then? I mean, there's no sign of a Caden settlement anywhere there. The character creator might be able to help us though. The Northerner race could be tied to the Caden, a face found among the hardy people of the unforgiving north. Some say they're descended from the giants. Now, considering the Caden's impressive power, heavy armor and huge weapons, maybe they are descended from the giants. It could also be that these tarnished Northerners are separate to Caden entirely. But that's where our trail of Caden seems to end. A sparse population of powerful warriors who sell their combat ability for hire. This land to the north, that could be the mountaintops of the giants, but I'm not sure, considering the lack of trace of any of that. What if it's a land further north of the lands between entirely? You see, as it turns out, there is such a place. Off to the far northwest of the Altus Plateau, we do actually see a land mass. If we fly there, people have done that with different cheats, you can see a wide section of land that exists there without any detail or texture, but it is a huge landmass. People speculate speculate that it could be a place cut from the game, or it might be used in the future in DLC. Personally though, I wonder if that could not be Caden. It is a landmass far to the north, even more north than the mountaintops of the giants. Could that be the true origin of the sellswords? Or is it that Caden is just a tiny settlement that's been lost from sight somewhere in the mountaintops of the giants? Let me know what you think, but I think that's too lame of an ending to be true. Moving forward, let's now talk about another land outside of the lands between, the lands of the Reeds. We see a variety of characters from this land, Eastern-inspired warriors with a bloody history. At war with itself, the Reedlanders seek honourable deaths and the honing of their combat skill. Unfortunately though, it seems a common theme that this bloody passion takes over. The joy of killing becomes a bit too much, and one Reedlander even impressed the Lord of Blood. Let's start with the character creator once more, the Reedlanders' description, which tells us this: a face from the far-away, isolated land of the Reeds, where blood is a familiar sight. The starting class, the Samurai, also aligns with this. That armor set, when altered, tells us this: the land of the Reeds has long been locked in a miserable civil war, during which time it has remained alienated from the cultures of its neighbours. Little wonder that the entire nation has succumbed to the blood-soaked madness. Or so it is said, a land at war with itself, with a mad passion for violence, so much that it's almost completely unaware, or uninvolved anyway, with the Golden Order. But another dynasty did notice it. The White Reed set is an enhanced version of the original Samurai set, and that tells us of the Inaba, worn by the Inaba, head disciples of the great swordsman Okuna. The Inaba travelled in pursuit of not only the master who abandoned them, but also proper deaths, won honourably through hard-fought combat. To be a White Reed is to seek death, fitting for the Inaba, who desired nothing more than to die by the sword. These great warriors desperately searched for the lands between to find their master, Okuna, who left them behind. Well, the Okuna mask tells us more. A wooden mask that depicts an old man baring his teeth. The more he sharpened his mind, the more the absurdities of the world came into stark relief. So Okuna renounced it all and rose to a higher plane. There was only himself, his katana, and its mastery. Before long, Okuna became a demon of a swordsman. So through his abandonment of the world and everything in it, he basically dedicated himself to the mastery of his blade in true, and became known as the demon of the sword. Maybe that's why he abandoned his disciples, to focus on himself and master the sword through great challenge, and ended up here in the lands between, where he could find demigods like Melania, for example, who would truly test him. But instead, he found an omen. He found Mohg, from the Rivers of Blood katana description. When Mohg, the Lord of Blood, first felt Okuna's sword and madness upon his flesh, he had a proposal: to offer Okuna the life of a demon whose thirst would never go unsated. Mohg gave Okuna the power of his cursed blood, that fiery blood power from the outer god that Mohg serves. And as that description states, the Rivers of Blood katana is now a cursed weapon which has felled countless men. Okuna became the mad demon of the lands between, felling countless foes using that cursed blood blade. His disciples, left to their fate, could never successfully catch up to him, despite how close they got. You see, as it turns out, we find Okuna near the highest point of the mountaintops of the giants, but not long before that, you pass the Spirit Caller cave, where his disciples are now trapped. They're enslaved, it would seem, by the Spirit Caller snail, and they were lost in that cave forever, so close to their master, yet so far. But this isn't all for the lands of the Reeds. No, there's two other NPCs we can talk about, Ura and Eleonora. Ura hunts the Bloody Fingers, those who have lost themselves to madness and the love of killing. He seeks out Eleonora, the woman he seems to love. Her weapon tells us more about her. This weapon was forged in the lands of the Reeds. The weapon of Eleonora, the violet Bloody Finger. The Bloody Fingers served Mohg, as we know, just like Okuna eventually did. Her mastery of the sword was such that her onslaught was described like a whirlwind, and now her legacy is stained by accursed blood. So just like Okuna, it seems she met Mohg and impressed him, and he also granted her the power of the cursed blood. Sadly though, Ura dies trying to defeat or save his lost love, and much like Okuna, we end up defeating her. I think it's very interesting. The most powerful Reedlanders align really well with Mohg and his bloody dynasty. Not all Reedlanders lose themselves to that blood-hungry madness though. Ura held true, and he was an impressive fighter in his own right, just like, say, the original disciples of Okuna, the Inaba. I like to speculate that if Mohg had succeeded in his plan, maybe he would have brought on the Reedlanders into his army in full. Kind of like how the Greater Will brings in other factions from other lands that suit it. Sadly though, we have no real idea of where the Lands of Reeds is actually in-game, no indication of where it would be. Let's now speak of another land, that was noticed by the Golden Order. I speak of Eochaid, where Elemer of the Briar comes from. Now, I won't go into too much detail with Elemer than the ball-bearing hunters as well, as I made a full lore video on that topic, but you can check that out if you want. What we are interested here, though, is Eochaid itself, a land sparsely populated with strange, passion-rejecting ways. The art of the dancing blades comes from that land, that telekinetic ability that we see with some weapons. Let's start with the armor set and the shield from Eochaid. These display a harsh and bland look. The briar that wraps around the shield and the set was actually added after Elemer came to the lands between, so try to ignore those and look at the stuff below. We're looking at what appears to be a very restrictive and emotionless set. No flair, almost like being encased in metal. The shield tells us why. It is a land of proud, solitary aesthetics. That means that they practice self-denial. Denial of your wants, your desires, your own needs, maybe even any interest at all. Away from one another in solitary, like hermits. Now, in my main video about Elemer, I said that land sounds very bleak and seems low population based on that. Or it was anyway. The regalia of Eochaid informs us further. Eochaid is a lesser, long-vanished domain. The land was indeed small after all, but now is vanished. I speculated that Elemer, based on his actions, served the Golden Order, who would crush any and all opposition to its ruling and ways, and then try to bring in those who would serve. I believe it's likely that as a land near the lands between, Eochaid was crushed by the Golden Order, and then it cherry-picked some of its population to serve. The ball-bearing hunters, Elemer, these are the only Eochaid characters we see in-game. They might even be all the same character, like all Elemer, but the regalia of the weapon says that the orange lining of the blade is actually copper, used as a conduit for the telekinetic power. And yet, that wasn't needed for Elemer with the Executioner sword. That description tells us that Elemer was able to furnish the sword with skills from Eochaid to perform that blade dance. Even though it was already a legendary weapon, he was able to use it in new ways. Not needing that copper, he could still perform the blade dance with a heavy, large weapon like that, compared to the regular blades. I think that means Elemer was just super skilled. Sadly, what we do know from this is that Eochaid is no more. I looked around the map to see if there was any area that might look like it'd been destroyed, and was like a small area at that, and there was one. This hole in the sea, just north of the shaded castle. I wonder if that could have been like the Isle of Eochaid, now destroyed. As fun as an idea that is, that's not based on anything at all, so don't take that seriously. Eochaid sounded like it was a pretty bleak place in any case, but it did breed very interesting combat ability, that telekinetic fighting style. Last but not least then, we finally speak about the Badlands, a place of great importance to us directly as the Tarnished. After all, Godfrey and the Tarnished, shunned by the Grace, made the long march back to the Badlands when Marika separated from Godfrey. A place far from the lands between is a harsh and desolated land, shunning anything not necessary for survival and only revering those who are powerful and strong. Starting with Godfrey himself, the first Elden Lord of the Golden Order, Godfrey was in fact not always known by that name. No, he was once hoarah loux, the warrior of the Badlands. His remembrance tells us a good amount. When Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was robbed of his grace, becoming tarnished, he took up with him his kinfolk and left the lands between. After the long march of the Tarnished came to an end, Godfrey divested himself of kinship, becoming a simple warrior once more. But the journey was not a successful one, as the axe of Godfrey was broken, as it says, broken in battle, fought as a leader of the Tarnished during the long march. Even though it seems Godfrey took up his old name, he did not remove Sarosh from his back until he fought us, meaning Sarosh was still suppressing his bloodlust at that time, and clearly, without that desire for combat, Godfrey was just not strong enough to survive the Badlands. You see, in the opening of the game, we see an image of those selected by Grace, those that are being returned to the lands between and being revived. One of those is Godfrey, dead and impaled in the Badlands. Sarosh is still upon his back there, but when he was revived, he began his long journey back again to the lands between. The Badlands sounds like a tough place though, that Godfrey himself could not survive without his full power. If we look to the character creator again, we can learn more thanks to the hero class, which is a battle axe wielding descendant of a Badlands chieftain. That armor set tells us that this is proof the wearer has slaughtered countless foes. Following the example of their chieftain, hoarah loux, the brave warriors of the Badlands shun excess adornment. So they shun anything that doesn't directly help in battle, just like their leader hoarah loux, aka Godfrey. The champions or heroes must be the Tarnished Godfrey took with him. Various weapons mention the Badlands too, like the Great Axe, a weapon of choice for a Badlands chieftain, but clearly hoarah loux is not the only chieftain in the region, and others were strong enough to defeat him. But what of his most notable descendant? Or maybe even his daughter, Nephili Loux, the warrior. She helps you face down Godric the Grafted as the adopted daughter of Gideon, who clearly knew she was powerful and maybe had the blood connections to Godfrey. Gideon wasn't the only one though. Celavis from Ranni's faction wanted to enslave her as a powerful puppet for his own purposes. And finally, her storyline, if fulfilled, has her become the new Lord of the Storm Keep, which was previously held by another descendant of Godfrey, Godric. Now, during her storyline, you can also meet her at the village of the Albinaurics. She mentions her childhood and how it compares to the village. The oppression of the weak, the murder and pillage left unchecked, a nightmare that was made by men. The Badlands, then, certainly sounds like a really horrible place. And when you give her the Stormhawk King's ashes, later in her questline, she's reminded of her first hawk. So it seems like animal companions are certainly a thing in the Badlands. You've got the Stormhawks, right? But then the lions like Sarosh for Godfrey. Finally, we also have her weapons, the Stormhawk axes, the signature weapon of warriors who strive to remain one with the storm, despite being so far from their place of birth. Much like the land of the Reeds, the Badlands seems to breed warriors, fighters of great power. The weak are abused and suppressed. The strong made chieftains and leaders. Rather than working together as a people, these are just bands of fighters that simply raid and battle, probably leading to a constant state of struggle and war. Clearly, the bloodless suppressed Godfrey could not survive there, but it was still a place that created great heroes and champions, like Nephili Loux, the possible daughter of Godfrey. Wherever this place is, it seems like it's very far away, and likely still exists, untouched by the Golden Order. Maybe in DLC, we could go there. But there you have it. Everything I could learn about the 5 lands around or outside the lands between. Quite a variety of places with their own history and culture. Most seem very low population, but they all seem to have one common theme. Great warriors and fighters are bred there, ultimately being used by one faction or another. Do you think it's possible we'll visit any of these lands in maybe DLC? Which is your most likely pick? If there's anything I've missed in this video on these topics, please do drop it in the comments. I'm always happy to learn more about any of it. If you've enjoyed the video, please drop a like. It'll really help the video be put out there, and the more people that see it, the more chance I have to make more of these. For now though, my throat is killing me, so I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Josh, Caden, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.